Jake Morrison rubbed his tired eyes and stared at the endless black of space through the bridge window. His cargo ship, the Frontier Dawn, was 3 days out from Mars Colony with a hold full of medical supplies bound for the outer rim. The job paid well, but the long hauls were getting harder on his aging body. "Captain, we're picking up something strange on the emergency channel," called Amy Foster from her position at the communications station. The young woman had served as his second-in-command for 2 years now, ever since leaving the Earth Defense Force. She was smart, tough, and had good instincts. Jake turned toward her. "What kind of strange?" Amy frowned at her screen. "It's a distress signal, but not like any I've heard before. The frequency is all wrong, and the language ... She shook her head. "It sounds desperate, but I can barely make out the words." "Put it on speakers." The bridge filled with a haunting sound. It was part music, part speech, with harmonics that seemed to vibrate in Jake's chest. Through the alien tones, broken words in Galactic Standard emerged. "Please ... anyone. Help us ... They come ... They take ... We die." The message repeated over and over, growing weaker each time. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. In 20 years of flying cargo runs, he had heard plenty of distress calls. This one was different. This one carried real terror. Carlos Martinez looked up from his engineering station. The stocky man's face was grim. "Captain, that signal is old. At least 3 months, maybe more. It's been bouncing around the sector, but nobody's responding." 3 months? Amy's voice was sharp with disbelief. "How is that possible?" "The Galactic Council monitors all emergency channels." Jake had been around long enough to know how the Council worked. They protected the rich core worlds and their trade routes. Everything else was considered low priority. "Where's it coming from?" Carlos checked his instruments. "Kepler 442b. That's way out in the frontier zone. Agricultural world, I think. Population maybe 50 million. What species?" "Vilari. They're crystal-based life forms. Peaceful types. Grow food for half the sector." Jake knew about the Vilari. They were quiet, gentle beings who had never bothered anyone. Their planet was beautiful, covered in crystal cities that sang in the wind. If someone was attacking them, it wasn't for territory or resources. It was something worse. "Amy, can you clean up that signal? I want to hear what they're really saying." Amy worked at her console for several minutes. Slowly, the alien harmonics became clearer. Jake could make out more words now, and what he heard made his blood run cold. The dark ships came from the void. They take our children. They harvest our crystal cores. The galaxy will not answer. We are alone. We are dying. Please, if anyone hears this, help us. We do not want to die." The bridge fell silent. Jake stared at the communication display, feeling sick. The Vilari were being systematically killed, and nobody cared enough to help them. "Captain," Carlos said quietly, "I'm reading something else. Long-range sensors are picking up ship signatures. In that system, big ones, military grade, council ships? No, sir. These are different. The computer doesn't recognize the design, but the energy signatures are all wrong. These ships run on something I've never seen before." Jake's mind raced. Unknown ships in Vilari space, harvesting crystal cores, and a 3-month-old distress. Call that nobody had answered. The pieces were starting to form a terrible picture. "Amy, patch me through to the Council Emergency Response Center." "Yes, sir." Amy worked her controls, then shook her head. "I'm getting an automated response. They're saying the Vilari situation has been classified as a non-essential threat. No military response authorized." "Non-essential?" Jake's voice was hard. 50 million people are dying, and it's non-essential? That's what they're saying, Captain. Jake stood up and began pacing the small bridge. He had seen this before. The council only cared about worlds that mattered to their politics and trade. The Velari grew food, but there were other agricultural worlds. They were expendable. What about the other major powers? The Nexus Federation? The Alteran Empire? Carlos pulled up his communication logs. Nothing, Captain. The Velari have been broadcasting for 3 months. Nobody's even acknowledged the signal. Jake stopped pacing and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, gentle beings were being butchered while the galaxy looked the other way. It was wrong. It was evil. And apparently, nobody with power cared enough to stop it. Change course, he said suddenly. Amy looked up in surprise. Sir? You heard me. Set course for Kepler 442b. Captain, that's a 4-day journey. Our delivery to Titan Station, ... double quotes. Can wait. Jake's voice was firm. Those people are dying. Someone needs to see what's happening. Carlos shook his head. Captain, with respect, what can we do? We're a cargo. Hauler, not a warship. If there are hostile aliens in that system, ... then we'll run. But first, we're going to see what the hell is going on. Jake sat back in his captain's chair and pulled up the ship's communication system. He scrolled through his contact list, looking at names he hadn't called in years. Old friends, former military buddies, independent traders, even a few pirates he had dealt with over the years. Amy, I want you to send a message on all the old emergency frequencies, the ones we used during the Earth Exodus. What kind of message? Jake thought for a moment. Tell them there are 50 million innocent people dying, and nobody with power gives a damn. Tell them we're going to take a look, and if anyone else has a conscience, they're welcome to join us. Amy's fingers hesitated over her controls. Captain, that could be seen as inciting unauthorized military action. The Council doesn't like independent operations. The Council can kiss my ass. Jake's voice was cold. Send the message. As the Frontier Dawn changed course toward the distant Velari system, Jake wondered if anyone would answer. He wasn't military anymore. He didn't have a fleet or an army. All he had was an old cargo ship and a crew of 3. But sometimes, he thought, 3 people with consciences were worth more than a whole government without one. The message went out across human space, bouncing from relay to relay, carrying a simple truth. Someone needed help, and the powerful had failed them. Now it was time to see if ordinary people could do what their leaders would not dot in the depths of space. The Frontier Dawn flew toward whatever horrors awaited in the Velari system. Behind her, across dozens of worlds, communication systems began to light up with responses. The galaxy had failed the Velari, but maybe humanity would not. The message spread through human space like wildfire. On New Austin, a frontier mining colony on the edge of known space, Sheriff Kate Williams was finishing her evening patrol when her communication unit crackled to life. She listened to Jake. Morrison's transmission twice, her jaw tightening with each word. Kate had seen enough injustice in her 35 years. Growing up on Earth during the resource wars, watching her family struggle while the rich lived in luxury, joining the colonial police to make a difference on the frontier. But this was different. This was genocide. Kate walked into Murphy's Bar, the only decent drinking establishment in New Austin. The place was packed with miners, traders, and drifters. She climbed onto a chair and shouted for attention. Listen. Up. There's 50 million people dying out there, and nobody's helping them. She played Jake's message over the bar sound system. The room fell silent as the desperate Velari plea echoed through the speakers. When it finished, Kate looked around at the hardened faces staring back at her. I'm going, she announced. Anyone with a ship and a backbone can join me. Big Mike Taylor, who ran the mining operation, stood up. "Sheriff, that's 4 days from here. What can we do against alien warships?" "More than sitting here drinking beer," Kate shot back. "These Velari never hurt anyone. They just grow food and mind their own business. Now something's killing them, and the council says they don't matter." Old Pete Martinez, Carlos's uncle, slammed his fist on the bar. "My nephew's out there somewhere. If Jake Morrison's getting involved, then the Martinez family stands with him." One by one, others began to volunteer. Sarah Bennett, who owned 3 cargo haulers. Jack Stevens, a former Marine who ran salvage operations. Even Crazy Eddie Walsh, whose ship was held together with duct tape and prayers. By morning, Kate had assembled a convoy of 12 ships. They weren't much to look at. Mining vessels, cargo haulers, a couple of police cutters, but they were what she had. Meanwhile, on the prison world of Tartarus, the news was spreading through very different channels. Ben Hayes had been rotting in a cell for 3 years, convicted of disobeying orders during the Battle of Proxima. The former Earth Special Forces operative had refused to fire on civilian refugees, earning him a court-martial and a long sentence. Warden Frank Collins found Ben in the prison workshop, where he spent his days fixing broken equipment. Collins was a decent man who had always believed Ben got a raw deal. "Hayes, you need to hear this." Collins played Jake's message on his personal communicator. Ben listened without expression, but Collins could see the old soldier stirring behind his eyes. "There's more," Collins continued. "Word is spreading. Independent operators all over the sector are gearing up to help, but they're going to need people who know how to fight." Ben looked up from the machinery he was repairing. "What are you saying, Warden?" "I'm saying maybe it's time some good men got a chance to do the right thing. There are 47 political prisoners in this facility, men and women who got locked up for having consciences. If they volunteer for this mission, you'd let us go?" Collins nodded. "Temporary release for humanitarian purposes. Official paperwork can get lost for a while." Within hours, Ben was organizing a volunteer force of former soldiers, exiled officers, and political prisoners. They had no ships, but word was getting out. Help was coming from unexpected places. On the hidden asteroid base that served as headquarters for the notorious pirate captain Ryan Stone, the crew was dividing up loot from Fulham, their latest raid when the message came through. Stone was a hard man who had turned to piracy after losing everything to council corruption, but he still had principles. "Boys," he announced to his crew of cutthroats and rebels, "we just got offered a job with no pay, high casualties, and 0 chance of profit." His first mate, Tony Blake, grinned. "Sounds like our kind of job, Captain." Stone's fleet of 8 fast attack ships wasn't much, but they were experienced fighters who knew how to hurt larger vessels. More importantly, they knew the galaxy's underworld. Stone began calling in favors from smugglers, gunrunners, and other pirates. The response was surprising. Even criminals, it seemed, had limits. Dr. Lisa Park heard the message while working in her laboratory on Titan's Forge, a research station in the outer system. She had been exiled from the core worlds 5 years ago for developing AI systems that the Council deemed too dangerous. Her crime was creating machines that could think for themselves. Lisa stared at her latest creation, a squad of combat drones with advanced artificial intelligence. They were designed for planetary defense, but the Council had banned their development. Too dangerous, they said. Too unpredictable. She made a decision that would change everything. Her research ship, the science vessel Aurora, lifted off within hours, carrying 24 AI combat drones and their brilliant creator toward the growing fleet. But humans weren't the only ones responding to Jake's call. On a dead world in the Outer Veil, something that had once been called the Kithra Collective stirred to electronic life. The machine intelligence had been cast out by their organic creator centuries ago, deemed too dangerous to exist. They had been hiding ever since, slowly rebuilding their strength. The Kithara had monitored the Velari situation with their vast sensor networks. They understood genocide better than most. They had nearly suffered it themselves. When Jake's message reached their hidden servers, the machines made a decision that surprised even them. They would help. 3 Kithara ships, sleek vessels of living metal and light, began moving toward the rendezvous point. Each ship carried 100 combat frames, artificial beings that could think, fight, and die for something greater than themselves. In the bioresearch labs of Kepler Station, the Zephyrians heard the call. They were engineered soldiers, created by the Council for a war that ended before they could fight. When peace came, they were deemed too dangerous to integrate into society, too violent, too unpredictable. They had been exiled to the frontier, forgotten by their creators. Colonel Amanda Carter, leader of the Zephyrian exile community, assembled her warriors. There were only 300 of them left, but each one was worth 10 normal soldiers. They had been bred for war, trained from birth to fight impossible odds. Brothers and sisters, she announced to her gathered troops, we have been offered a chance to prove our worth, not to those who created us, but to ourselves. The Zephyrians loaded onto their single transport ship, the Valkyrie's Rest, and joined. The growing armada. News of the gathering fleet reached the highest levels of the Galactic Council. In the gleaming towers of Altair Prime, Council President Marcus Vex watched intelligence reports with growing concern. How many ships? He asked. His aide, latest count shows over 200 vessels converging on the rendezvous point, sir. Mostly human independents, but we're detecting some exile faction signatures as well. Vex frowned. This Morrison character is becoming a problem. A few cargo haulers we could ignore, but this looks like a fleet. Should we intervene? Sir? No. Vex's voice was cold. Let them go. The Krathan horde will destroy them, and we'll be rid of several troublesome elements at once. Sometimes problems solve themselves. Far from the council chambers, Admiral Nathan Cross received Jake's message while tending his small garden on Shepherd's Moon. The former commander of Earth's 7th Fleet had been forced into retirement after questioning orders during the Proxima incident, the same incident that had landed Ben Hayes in prison. Nathan was 63 years old, gray-haired and tired. He had spent his life serving the greater good, only to be cast aside when politics mattered more than principles. Part of him wanted to ignore the message and tend his vegetables in peace, but only part of him. He walked to his small communications array and sent a single message to every ship in the growing fleet. This is Admiral Nathan Cross. I'm bringing the Defiant Star out of mothballs. Anyone who wants to organize this mess, meet me at coordinates 247.8391. Let's show these bastards what happens when you ignore a cry for help. The old Admiral's battle-scarred flagship hadn't flown in 3 years, but her weapons still worked. Nathan began the long process of bringing his ship back to life, knowing that somewhere in the dark, 50 million innocent beings were counting on strangers to save them. Across human space, the message continued to spread. Small groups became larger ones. Individual ships joined growing fleets. Pirates worked alongside police officers. Exiled soldiers shared quarters with disgraced officers. Scientists collaborated with criminals. They came from different worlds, different backgrounds, different species. Some had been cast out by their societies. Others had chosen exile rather than compromise their principles. A few were simply good, people who couldn't ignore suffering. But they all shared one thing. When the galaxy's powerful had failed to act, they had chosen to stand up. The lost fleet was gathering, and soon they would discover what horrors awaited in the Velari system. The lost fleet arrived at the edge of the Velari system to find hell itself waiting for them. Admiral Nathan Cross stood on the bridge of the Defiant Star, staring at sensor readings that made his blood run cold. The beautiful crystal world of Kepler 442b was dying. "My God," whispered Commander Amy Foster from her position on Jake Morrison's ship. Her voice carried across the fleet communication channel that linked over 300 vessels. "What are those things?" The alien ships were unlike anything in the galactic databases. They were dark, organic-looking vessels that seemed to pulse with their own malevolent life. The smallest were the size of cruisers. The largest dwarfed anything the Council had ever built. "Crafen Horde," said Dr. Lisa Park from her research vessel. Her AI systems were already analyzing the enemy ships. "I've heard rumors. They're supposed to be from dark space, beyond the galactic rim. Nobody's ever seen them and lived to tell about it." Jake Morrison's voice crackled through the communication system. "Well, now we know why." The surface of Kepler 442b was scarred, with massive mining operations. Where once beautiful crystal cities had sung in harmony with the wind, now only jagged wounds remained. Huge harvester ships were strip mining the planet's crust, tearing out the very foundations of the Valari civilization. "Sir," reported Tony Blake from Ryan Stone's pirate ship, "I'm detecting life signs in the underground caverns. Looks like millions of Valari are hiding in the old crystal mines." Admiral Cross felt a spark of hope. They weren't too late. Not completely. All ships, this is Admiral Cross, were outnumbered 3-1, flying mismatched vessels with no unified command structure. By all military logic, we should run. He paused, looking around at his own bridge crew, volunteers from a dozen different worlds, united only by the refusal to let innocents die. "But we didn't come here for logic. We came here because it was right. All vessels, prepare for combat." Battle began badly. The Crathan ships were faster than they looked, and their weapons cut through armor like it was paper. Captain Sarah Bennett's cargo hauler exploded in the first exchange, taking 12 volunteers with her. The pirate Captain Eddie Walsh's jury-rigged ship lost power and drifted helplessly toward the enemy lines. "We're getting slaughtered," shouted Sheriff Kate Williams from her police cutter. Her small convoy of mining ships was taking heavy damage. Then, something unexpected happened. From the depths of Kepler 442b came a sound that touched every soul in the fleet. It was the Valari themselves, singing from their underground shelters. Their harmonic voices carried through subspace, reaching every ship in the battle. Dr. Lisa Park's eyes widened as her instruments detected the signal. "Admiral, they're trying to communicate. The Valari are broadcasting on harmonic frequencies. It's not just music, it's information." The alien song flowed through the fleet's communication systems, and suddenly everything changed. The chaotic battle began to organize itself. Ships that had been fighting alone suddenly moved in perfect coordination. The Valari weren't just singing, they were sharing their collective consciousness, linking every vessel in the fleet into a single unified force. "This is impossible," breathed Commander Amy Foster, as her targeting system suddenly showed her exactly where to aim. "I can feel the other ships. I know what they're going to do before they do it." The tide of battle shifted. The lost fleet began fighting like a single organism, each ship knowing its role instinctively. Captain Ryan Stone's pirates used their speed to draw enemy fire, while Admiral Cross's heavy ships delivered devastating volleys. The Kithura combat frames, immune to the harmonic network due to their artificial nature, served as anchor points that kept the formation stable. But the real surprise came when Sergeant Ben Hayes led the first ground assault on the planet's surface. His mixed unit of former prisoners, exile soldiers, and Zephyrian shock troops had one mission: reach the Valari civilians and establish a defensive perimeter. The landing was a nightmare. Crafen warriors were 8 feet tall, covered in chitinous armor and armed with bioweapons that could dissolve flesh. They moved like insects, fast and coordinated, and they showed no mercy. "They're harvesting the civilians," shouted Corporal Danny Rodriguez as his squad took cover behind a fallen crystal spire. "They're not just killing them, they're taking them apart." Ben Hayes had seen many horrors in his military career, but this was different. The Kraken weren't just conquering the Velari, they were systematically harvesting their crystal biology, using some kind of extraction process that kept the victims alive during the procedure. "All units, priority target the harvester machines." Ben's voice cut through the chaos. "Whatever they're doing to these people, we stop it now." A ground battle raged through the crystal caverns beneath the planet's surface. The Zephyrians, engineered for exactly this kind of close-quarters combat, proved devastatingly effective against the Kraken warriors. But it was the human Marines who showed something the enemy hadn't expected. They fought harder when they were protecting others than when they were protecting themselves. Commander Grace Turner, leading a squadron of converted mining ships, spotted something that changed everything. A massive Kraken dreadnought was positioning itself above the largest Velari refugee camp, preparing to deploy harvester drones. "All ships, this is Turner. That dreadnought is about to hit the main civilian shelter. We've got maybe 2 minutes before it starts harvesting 3 million Velari." Admiral Cross checked his tactical display. The dreadnought was too well protected. His heavy ships couldn't get close enough, and the smaller vessels didn't have the firepower to penetrate its defenses. "Turner, pull back. We'll find another." "Way, negative, Admiral." Grace's voice was calm, almost peaceful. "My ship's reactor is already overloading. I'm going to ram that bastard." "Grace, no. There has to be another way." "There is no other way, sir. But that's okay. We came here to save these people. Sometimes that means dying for them." Grace Turner's mining ship, the Lucky Strike, broke formation and accelerated toward the Kraken dreadnought. Enemy fire tore through her hull, but she kept flying on momentum and determination. Her final transmission echoed through the fleet. "We came because no one else would. We stay because it's right." The Lucky Strike struck the dreadnought's reactor, core at full velocity. The explosion was visible from orbit, a brief star that lit up the crystal caverns below. When the light faded, both ships were gone. The 3 million Velari civilians were safe. The battle turned into a rout. The Kraken, faced with enemies who fought with suicidal courage and impossible coordination, began to retreat. Their ships fled toward the edge of the system, abandoning their harvesting operations. But victory came at a terrible price. Nearly 100 ships had been destroyed, and over 8,000 volunteers were dead or missing. The survivors limped through the wreckage, searching for comrades and counting their losses. Jake Morrison stood in his cargo bay, now converted into a makeshift medical station, watching Dr. Lisa Park tend to wounded Velari civilians. The crystal beings were unlike anything he had ever seen. Tall, graceful, with bodies that seemed to be made of living jewels. They communicated through harmonic songs that felt like music in his bones. One of the Velari elders, calling itself Resonance of Distant Stars, approached Jake. Its voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Human who came when called, we owe you a debt that cannot be repaid. You came to our aid when the great powers of the galaxy abandoned us." Jake shook his head. "We just did what was right." "What is right is not always what is done," the Velari replied. "Your species and those who fight beside you have shown us something we had not known existed. Courage without reward. Sacrifice without recognition. You came not for conquest or gain, but simply because we needed help." The Velari elder gestured to the fleet of damaged ships floating around the planet. "The Great Galactic Council calls you primitives and outcasts. They see your diversity as weakness, your independence as chaos, but we see the truth. In your differences, you have found unity. In your exile, you have found purpose. Admiral Cross joined the conversation, his face grim. Elder, I'm afraid this is just the beginning. Our sensors detected Krathin signals being transmitted before they retreated. They were reporting to something bigger. The Valari's harmonic voice took on a darker tone. Yes, human admiral. What attacked us here was merely a scouting force. The true horde lies beyond the galactic rim, and they have been watching your council worlds for some time. How do you know this? We learned much from the Krathin computer systems before your brave warrior destroyed their command ship. They have been testing your defenses, probing for weakness. The attack on our world was meant to gauge the galaxy's response to aggression. Jake felt cold dread settle in his stomach. And now they know the truth. The Council won't defend anyone who doesn't matter to their politics. Precisely. The Krathin believe your core worlds are vulnerable. They plan to strike at the heart of galactic civilization, while the Council is distracted by internal politics. Admiral Cross studied the tactical displays showing Krathin retreat vectors. How long do we have? Perhaps 6 of your months, perhaps less. The horde gathers in dark space, preparing for war. The reality of their situation began to sink in. They had won a single battle, but the war was just beginning. 3 weeks after the Battle of Kepler 442b, the heroes who had saved 50 million lives found themselves branded as criminals. The Galactic Council's response to their victory was swift and merciless. Admiral Nathan Cross stood in the communication center of his flagship, reading the official proclamation that had been broadcast across the galaxy. His weathered face was grim as he spoke to the assembled fleet commanders. They're calling us unauthorized military forces engaging in illegal warfare, he announced. Every ship in this fleet, every person who fought to save the Valari, is now wanted for arrest by Council authorities. Captain Jake Morrison, his cargo ship still bearing scars from the battle, shook his head in disgust. 50 million innocent people would be dead if we hadn't acted. And this is our reward? Sheriff Kate Williams, her voice crackling through the communication system from her damaged police cutter, was more direct. Those council bastards sat on their hands while genocide happened. Now they want to arrest us for cleaning up their mess? The irony was bitter. While the Lost Fleet had been fighting for their lives against the Krathin horde, the Council had been debating the legal implications of unauthorized military action. Not the ethics of letting innocents die, but the paperwork involved in independent military operations. Dr. Lisa Park, monitoring Council communications from her research vessel, provided the ugly details. It gets worse. President Vex is calling us a dangerous precedent. He's worried that if independent groups can organize military operations, it might undermine Council authority. God forbid people should defend themselves when the government won't, muttered Pirate Captain Ryan Stone from his ship's bridge. Can't have that kind of dangerous thinking spreading around. But the Council's declaration had an unexpected consequence. Instead of isolating the Lost Fleet, it galvanized support across the galaxy. On hundreds of worlds, people who had never heard of the Valari began asking uncomfortable questions about their government's priorities. The Valari themselves provided the most powerful response. Elder resonance of distant stars, speaking for all 50 million survivors, formally petitioned to withdraw from the Galactic Council and join the Human Colonial Union, a loose confederation of independent worlds that existed outside Council control. We have seen the true face of Council protection, the Valari Elder announced in a broadcast that reached every corner of the galaxy. When we cried for help, they called us non-essential. When others answered our call, they branded them criminals. We choose to stand with those who stood with us. The political earthquake that followed was immediate. The Zephyrian exile community, led by Colonel Amanda Carter, formally requested membership in the Human Colonial Union. The Kythera Collective, emerging from centuries of hiding, offered to share their advanced technology with anyone willing. To defend the weak, even some council member species began to question their allegiance. The agricultural worlds that had depended on Velari food shipments asked why their government had been willing to let their suppliers be exterminated. The frontier colonies wondered if they would receive the same protection if they were attacked. President Marcus Vex watched the growing crisis from his office in the gleaming towers of Altair Prime. His aide, a nervous young Alteran named Xeris, briefed him on the latest intelligence reports. "Sir, the situation is deteriorating rapidly. 12 council member worlds have formally protested our handling of the Velari crisis. The Frontier Defense League is talking about withdrawing from the council entirely." Vex's scaled features twisted in anger. It's that Morrison character and his band of criminals. They've turned a simple police action into a political crisis. Sir, with respect, we never took any police action regarding the Velari situation. We classified it as non-essential and ignored it. The president's cold reptilian eyes fixed on his aide. Exactly. The system worked as designed. The Velari were not strategically important. Resources were not wasted on a low-priority situation. The fact that these unauthorized forces intervened has created unnecessary complications. What Vex didn't know was that Jake Morrison had discovered something far more dangerous than political embarrassment. The cargo captain had been analyzing the Krathan technology salvaged from the battle, and what he found kept him awake at night. "Admiral, you need to see this," Jake said as he met with Nathan Cross aboard the Defiant Star. He spread out data tablets showing Krathan ship designs, communication protocols, and strategic assessments. Admiral Cross studied the information with growing alarm. "These aren't random raiders. This is systematic intelligence gathering." "Exactly. The Krathan have been probing Council defenses for years. Look at these attack patterns. They've hit 17 different non-essential worlds in the past decade. Every time, the Council ignored the distress calls." Jake pulled up a star chart showing the attacked worlds. "It's not random, Admiral. They're testing response times, defensive capabilities, and political will. The Velari attack was just the latest test. And now they know the truth," Cross said grimly. "The Council won't defend anyone who doesn't have political value." Dr. Lisa Park joined the conversation via hologram from her research vessel. "It's worse than that. I've been analyzing the data streams the Krathan transmitted before they retreated. They weren't just reporting on our fleet capabilities. They were updating targeting priorities for a major offensive." She manipulated the holographic display to show projected attack vectors. "Based on their intelligence, the Krathan believe they can strike at the Council's core worlds while the government is distracted by internal political problems. They're planning to hit the industrial centers first, then move on to the political capitals." Admiral Cross felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. He had seen this before, intelligence reports that showed clear threats, political leaders too busy with their own agendas to pay attention, and career soldiers caught in the middle. "How long do we have?" "Best estimate, 4 to 6 months before the main Krathan invasion force arrives." Jake Morrison leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his graying hair. "We have to warn them. Whatever we think of the Council, there are billions of innocent people on those worlds." "Warn them with what?" Cross asked bitterly. "We're wanted criminals now. They'll arrest us the moment we enter Council space." As if summoned by their conversation, the communication system chirped with an incoming priority message. The face that appeared on the screen was familiar. Admiral Marcus Stone, Nathan's younger brother and current commander of the Council's First Fleet. The brothers had not spoken in 3 years, not since Nathan's forced retirement. Marcus looked older, his face lined with stress and the weight of command. "Nathan," Marcus said without preamble, "I need to talk to you." Privately. Admiral Cross gestured for the others to leave, then sealed the communication channel. Hello, Marcus. Come. To arrest me personally? Cut the crap, Nathan. You know why I'm calling. Do I? Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. The Krathan intelligence. We've been monitoring your communications. The Council thinks you're making it up to justify your illegal military action. Nathan felt a familiar frustration. And what do you think? I think you've never lied to me in your life. Marcus glanced around his own bridge, making sure he wasn't being overheard. I also think President Vex is more concerned with maintaining political control than defending the galaxy. So what are you going to do about it? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I don't know yet. But Nathan, you need to understand something. The Council is mobilizing the First and Second Fleets to arrest your people. They're calling it Operation Cleanup. They want to make an example of you. How long do we have? 72 hours before the fleets reach your position. Maybe less. Nathan nodded grimly. Thanks for the warning, Marcus. Don't thank me yet. I'm still under orders to arrest you if I see you. Marcus paused. But Nathan? If the Krathan intelligence is real, if there really is a massive invasion force coming, then the galaxy needs defenders more than it needs political prisoners, Nathan finished. Yeah, something like that. The communication ended, leaving Nathan alone with his thoughts. 72 hours before 2 entire Council fleets arrived to arrest the people, who had saved 50 million lives. It was almost funny in a dark way. Jake Morrison returned to the bridge just as Nathan was calling an emergency meeting of all fleet commanders. The cargo captain took one look at the Admiral's face and knew it was bad news. Let me guess. Council is sending the cavalry to arrest us. 2 full fleets. 72 hours. Jake whistled low. That's a lot of firepower to arrest a bunch of criminals and misfits. They're scared, Nathan said. We've shown that independent forces can organize and succeed where the Council failed. That threatens everything they believe about their own importance. Sheriff Kate Williams joined the conversation via communication link. Admiral, what are our options? We can't fight Council fleets. Whatever else they are, they're not enemies. No, they're not, Nathan agreed. But we can't let ourselves be arrested either. Not when we're the only ones who know about the real threat. Dr. Lisa Park's voice cut through the debate. Admiral, I'm detecting something on long-range sensors. Ships approaching from the outer system. Big ones. Nathan felt his blood turn to ice. Crave. The final battle began not in the depths of space, but in the Meridian system, where the Council's remaining loyal fleets had come to arrest the lost fleet. Admiral Marcus Stone stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Determination, watching. His brother's ragtag armada prepare for what might be their last stand. The irony was bitter. 2 Council fleets, commanded by Admiral Harrison Webb, had arrived to arrest the only people trying to save the galaxy. Webb was a political officer, more concerned with following orders than understanding their consequences. Admiral Stone. Came Webb's voice over the communication channel. You have 1 hour to surrender your vessels and submit to arrest. Your unauthorized action will not be tolerated. Marcus looked at his tactical display. Webb commanded over 200 ships, all modern Council vessels with trained crews. The lost fleet had grown to nearly 400 ships, but most were civilian conversions, mining vessels, and cargo haulers. In a straight fight, they would be massacred. Admiral Webb, Marcus replied. Perhaps you should ask yourself why you're arresting the people who saved 50 million lives instead of preparing to fight the force. That's about to destroy billions more. The Council has determined that the Krathan threat is exaggerated propaganda designed to justify illegal military actions. Jake Morrison, listening from his bridge aboard the Frontier Dawn, couldn't help but laugh bitterly. They're about to learn how wrong they are. Dr. Lisa Park's voice cut through the tension. Admiral Cross, I'm detecting massive gravitational distortions at the edge of the system. Something big is coming out of hyperspace. The long-range sensors lit up with contacts that dwarfed anything they had seen before. The Krathan invasion force was arriving early, and it was enormous. Thousands of dark ships materialized at the system's edge, their bioorganic hulls pulsing with malevolent energy. Admiral Webb's voice had lost its confident tone. What are those things? Those, Admiral Nathan Cross said grimly, are the people you should have been preparing to fight. The Krathan fleet was unlike anything in galactic military doctrine. The ships moved like living creatures, coordinating, through some kind of hive mind that made their formations impossibly fluid. The smallest vessels were the size of destroyers. The largest were mobile cities, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Elder resonance of distant stars had warned them about the Krathan hierarchy, but seeing it in person was terrifying. The invasion force wasn't just an army. It was an ecosystem of predators that had perfected the art of consuming entire civilizations. All ships. Admiral Cross announced to both fleets, this is not a drill. The Krathan have arrived, and they're heading straight for the core worlds. Every ship in this system needs to work together, or we're all dead. Admiral Webb was still struggling to understand what he was seeing. Admiral Cross, these readings must be wrong. No fleet can be this large. Open your eyes, Webb. Marcus Stone shouted over the communication channel. The Krathan horde is real, and they're about to turn your precious core worlds into harvesting grounds. Sheriff Kate Williams, commanding her small convoy of mining ships, watched the approaching enemy with professional calm. Admiral, what are our orders? Nathan Cross studied the tactical situation with decades of military experience. The Krathan were approaching in a massive formation, clearly planning to overwhelm any resistance through sheer numbers. Traditional tactics would be useless against such overwhelming force, but the Lost Fleet had never relied on traditional tactics. All ships, this is Admiral Cross. We're going to do what we do best, fight dirty. Captain Stone, take your pirates and hit there. Supply lines. Sheriff Williams, your mining ships know how to make big explosions. Dr. Park, I need your AI systems to coordinate our smaller vessels. A battle plan was insane, and everyone knew it. They were asking civilian vessels to fight a military force that had conquered half the galaxy. But as Jake Morrison listened to the orders, he felt something he hadn't expected. Confidence. These people had already done the impossible once. Maybe they could do it again. The first phase of the battle was chaos. Admiral Webb's council ships tried to use standard military formations against an enemy that didn't follow standard rules. The Krathan bioships swarmed the heavy cruisers, using their superior numbers to overwhelm defensive systems, but the Lost Fleet fought differently. Captain Ryan Stone's pirates used hit-and-run tactics, striking at Krathan command ships and disappearing before the enemy could respond. The converted mining ships, filled with industrial explosives, became massive suicide weapons that could take out vessels 10 times their size. The real game-changer came when Dr. Lisa Park activated her Eye Combat Network. Her machines linked every ship in the Lost Fleet, creating a coordination system that the Krathan couldn't understand or counter. Suddenly, 400 mismatched vessels began fighting like a single organism. This is impossible, breathed Admiral Webb as he watched cargo haulers and police cutters outmaneuvering his trained crews. How are they doing this? They're fighting for something they believe in, Admiral Marcus Stone replied. Not following orders because they have to. The battle's turning point came when Admiral Webb finally made a choice. Watching council ships being destroyed while the Lost Fleet's unconventional tactics actually worked. He faced a decision that would define his career and his conscience. A massive Crothan biodreadnought was heading straight for his flagship, its weapons charging for a killing blow. Webb's trained response would be to maintain formation and trust in superior technology. Instead, he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. All Council ships, this is Admiral Webb, abandon standard formations. Follow the lost. Fleets lead. If these criminals can fight these monsters, so can we. The psychological effect was immediate. Council crews who had been fighting out of duty suddenly began fighting with passion. The rigid military formations dissolved into the fluid, adaptive tactics that the Lost Fleet had pioneered. Jake Morrison found himself coordinating a mixed squadron of both Council cruisers and converted cargo ships, using his knowledge of civilian ship capabilities to maximize their effectiveness. The formal barriers between military and civilian, legal and criminal, disappeared in the face of shared necessity. The tide of battle turned when the Kithera Collective revealed their true capabilities. The machine intelligences had been holding back, unsure if they would be accepted by organic beings. But in the heat of battle, they unleashed technologies that had been hidden for centuries. Kithera combat frames, each one a work of art and engineering, tore through Crothan bio-armor like it was paper. Their ships, made of programmable matter, adapted to enemy tactics in real time. The ancient AI collective, exiled for being too dangerous, proved that sometimes dangerous was exactly what the galaxy needed. The Zephyrian shock troops, led by Colonel Amanda Carter, boarded and captured a Crothan command vessel. What they found in its biocomputer systems horrified even hardened soldiers. The Crothan had been planning this invasion for decades, systematically identifying and eliminating anyone who might be able to resist them. The Council's policy of ignoring non-essential threats hadn't been political indifference. It had been exactly what the Crothan wanted, a galaxy that had forgotten how to defend itself. Admiral, Colonel Carter reported from the captured ship, the Crothan have lists. Every military leader, every ship captain, every scientist who might pose a threat. They were planning to eliminate all resistance before the invasion began. How many names on the list? Admiral Cross asked. All of us. Every person who answered Jake Morrison's call, every ship that came to help the Velari. We weren't just criminals to the Council. We were priority targets for the Crothan. The realization spread through both fleets like wildfire. The Lost Fleet hadn't just been fighting for the Velari. They had been fighting for the galaxy's ability to defend itself. Admiral Webb's voice came over the communication channel. His tone completely changed from the beginning of the battle. Admiral Cross, Admiral Stone, I owe you both an apology. The Council was wrong. We were all wrong. As the last Crothan ships retreated toward dark space, the survivors began to count the cost. Nearly a third of both fleets had been destroyed, but they had achieved something unprecedented. They had stopped the Crothan Horde's main invasion force. More importantly, they had proven that the galaxy could defend itself if its people were willing to work together. In the weeks that followed, the political landscape changed forever. The old Galactic Council, discredited by their failure to respond to the Crothan threat, dissolved in scandal and recrimination. In its place, a new organization emerged, the Galactic Defense Alliance. Jake Morrison, the cargo captain whose simple act of compassion had started everything, found himself promoted to Admiral of the Frontier Defense Force. His mission was to ensure that no cry for help would ever go unanswered again. The Lost Fleet became the core of the new Alliance military, their unconventional tactics and diverse membership becoming the model for galactic defense. Humans worked alongside AI, exiles served beside former Council officers, and pirates fought alongside police. Sheriff Kate Williams established training centers where civilian vessels could learn combat techniques. Dr. Lisa Parks, AI network became the standard for fleet